The chapel in Willow Creek was packed, but the silence inside felt heavier than any sermon I had ever sat through. The casket lay at the front, adorned with lilies and roses that smelled far too sweet for the woman inside. Phyllis Donahue, our neighborhood's self-appointed moral guardian and the most feared gossip in 3 counties, was finally at peace. Or so we all hoped. I shifted uncomfortably. In my pew, the wooden bench creaking beneath me. The stained glass windows cast mosaics of colored light across the congregation, but nothing could brighten the mood. Nobody was crying. That's what struck me most. At most funerals, there's at least someone dabbing at their eyes, shoulders shaking with grief. Not here. Just stiff backs and averted gazes. Pastor Fields stood at the pulpit, his collar seeming to choke him more than usual. I'd known him since moving to Willow Creek 2 years ago. A kind man with perpetually worried eyes that seemed especially troubled today. "We are gathered to commemorate the life of Phyllis Eleanor Donahue," he began, voice echoing through the chapel. "A dedicated member of our community for over 40 years. The pause before dedicated spoke volumes. I glanced around at my neighbors. There was Tom and Sarah Parker, whose teenage daughter had been the subject of Phyllis's rumors about staying out too late with boys. The Ramirez family, who Phyllis had complained about at every HOA meeting for their loud ethnic cooking smells. Mrs. Chen, whose garden gnomes Phyllis had repeatedly reported to the city as eyesores degrading property values. And then there was me, Samantha Hayes, 29-year-old nurse at Willow Creek Medical Center, Phyllis's favorite target. "As is customary," Pastor Fields continued, tugging at his collar, "I'd like to invite anyone who wishes to share memories of Phyllis to come forward." The silence that followed was excruciating. Eyes dropped to laps, throats cleared, feet shuffled against the carpet. A full minute passed with nothing but the sound of the old heating system rattling through the vents. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the nurse in me, the part that couldn't stand to see anyone, even Phyllis Donahue, depart without a word of kindness. Maybe it was the absurdity of the moment. Or maybe I just couldn't bear the pitiful look on Pastor Fields' face as he stood there waiting for someone, anyone, to step up. My legs moved before my brain caught up. The click of my modest heels against the hardwood floor seemed deafening as I approached the pulpit. Pastor Fields' eyebrows shot up in surprise, then settled into a grateful smile as he stepped aside. I stood there, facing the congregation, my neighbors, my community, all staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to outright suspicion. The last person they expected to eulogize Phyllis Donahue was the young nurse she'd made a special project of tormenting. "Phyllis Donahue," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "was kind." The lie felt strange on my tongue, but I pushed forward. She was attentive, always looking out for her neighbors. Another lie. A woman who gave more than she took. The biggest lie of all. Gasps rippled through the chapel. From the back I heard someone scoff. Mary Winters, Phyllis's bridge partner and occasional gossip accomplice, was staring at me with her mouth hanging open. She noticed things others missed, I continued, which was actually true, though not in the way I was implying. She was passionate about our community. Also true, if you counted her. Passion for policing everyone in it. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my spine under my black dress. What was I doing? This woman had made my life a living hell since the day I moved in next door to her. She'd spread rumors that I was having an affair with Dr. Thompson at the hospital. She'd told everyone my sudden move to Willow Creek was because I'd been fired from my last job for stealing medication. None of it was true, but in a small town, Mudsticks. Yet here I was, eulogizing her with compliments she'd never earned. Phyllis believed in standards, I said, finding a diplomatic truth. And while we may not have always agreed on what those standards should be, there was no denying her conviction. A murmur spread through the crowd like wildfire. Was I really saying these things? About Phyllis? Then came the sound that froze us all. Applause, slow, deliberate, echoing off the chapel walls. All eyes turned to the front row where Daniel Ortiz, her lawyer, rose to his feet, clapping with a strange satisfaction. I recognized him from the few times I'd seen him visit Phyllis. Tall, sharp-featured, always in immaculate suits despite our town's casual nature. "Congratulations," he announced, his voice booming in the stunned silence. "You passed her final test." Confusion erupted. Whispers swirled. My pulse hammered in my ears as Daniel adjusted his tie and looked at me directly. "What I'm about to reveal," he said, pausing for dramatic effect, will change everything you thought you knew about Phyllis Donahue, and it will tear this neighborhood apart. The room fell into chaos. Mrs. Chen was on her feet, demanding explanations. Tom Parker was arguing with someone 2 rows back. Pastor Fields was trying to restore order, his hands raised in a placating gesture that no one heeded. And me? I stood frozen at the pulpit, wondering what fresh hell Phyllis Donahue had managed to unleash, even from beyond the grave. Daniel Ortiz waited until the noise subsided, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the pandemonium around him. When he spoke again, his words felt like individual stones dropping into a still pond. Nurse Hayes, would you please remain after the service? There are matters we need to discuss. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As for the rest of you, he continued, scanning the room, I suggest you reflect on what true character means. Phyllis certainly did in her final days. He sat down, leaving us all in a state of bewildered anticipation. As I returned to my seat, legs shaking, I caught the eyes of my neighbors. Some looked confused, others suspicious. A few seemed almost afraid. Whatever Phyllis's final test was, I had apparently passed it, and somehow I knew that was going to change everything. Pastor Fields cleared his throat, desperately trying to regain control of the service. Let us pray. But I couldn't pray. I couldn't think. I could only sit there wondering what Phyllis Donahue, the cruelest woman in Willow Creek, had set in motion, and why, of all people, she had chosen me to be part of it. 6 months earlier, I was arranging daffodils in a vase when I first felt Phyllis Donahue's eyes on me. I'd moved into the Blue Craftsman at 432 Maple Lane just 3 days before, and was trying to make the place feel like home. Through my kitchen window, I caught her watching from her porch across the way. A thin woman with carefully styled silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to be cataloging my every move. I waved, offering the neighborly smile I'd perfected growing up in 5 different foster homes. The kind that says, I come in peace, please accept me. She didn't wave back. Later that afternoon, as I hauled the last of my moving boxes from my car, she appeared at her mailbox, timing it perfectly to intercept me. You're the new nurse, she said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am, Samantha Hayes. I shifted the box to my hip and extended my hand. Just moved from Portland. She looked at my hand like I was offering her a dead fish. Single, are you? Yes, I am. She pursed her lips. Unusual for a woman your age, almost 30. 29, I corrected gently, letting my hand drop. Just started at Willow Creek Medical Center last week. Dr. Thompson hired you, I suppose? I nodded, wondering how she knew. He's the head of... I know who he is. She cut me off. His wife is in my bridge club. Lovely woman, very trusting. There was something in her tone that made my skin prickle, as if she'd already decided I was a threat to the Thompsons' marriage. Well, nice to meet you, Mrs. Donahue, Phyllis Donahue. I'm the HOA president. She looked pointedly at my porch where I'd placed a ceramic garden gnome, a housewarming gift from my favorite patient back in Portland. You'll want to read the neighborhood covenants. Section 8, paragraph 3 specifically addresses lawn ornaments. And with that, she was gone, leaving me with the distinct impression I'd failed some test I hadn't known I was taking. That night, my next-door neighbor on the other side, Ellen Wilcox, brought over a casserole and filled me in. Don't take it personally, Ellen said, a kind woman in her 60s with laugh lines around her eyes. Phyllis treats everyone like they're guilty until proven innocent, and even then, the verdict is subject to change. We sat on my porch steps, eating her chicken casserole straight from the dish. Been that way as long as anyone can remember. Ellen continued. She moved here with her husband back in the 80s. He died about 15 years ago. Heart attack. Some say he died just to get away from her tongue. That's terrible, I said, though I couldn't help a small smile. Ellen shrugged. Gallows humor. It's how we cope with Hurricane Phyllis. She's got dirt on everyone in this town. Real or imagined. Most of us just keep our heads down and try to stay off her radar. Too late for me, I think. Oh, honey. Ellen patted my knee. The moment you signed the lease on this place, you were in her sights. This house shares a property line with hers on the back corner. She's run off the last 3 tenants with her complaints. I looked down at my new home's charming but worn exterior. The rent had seemed too good to be true. Now I understood why. Great, I sighed. Maybe I should have researched the neighborhood better. Nonsense. Willow Creek is a wonderful place. We look after our own here, even the ones Phyllis decides to target. She took our empty dishes. Just, maybe move that gnome to the backyard. Choose your battles. I did move the gnome, but it didn't matter. Within 2 weeks, Phyllis had decided I was Willow Creek's newest problem. It started with small things. She complained to the rental company about my ATU recycling bin being visible from the street. She called the police about suspicious noises when I had Ellen over for coffee. But it escalated when she spotted Dr. Thompson dropping me off after my car broke down one rainy evening. The next day, whispers followed me at the grocery store. Mrs. Peterson, whose husband I'd cared for during his knee surgery, suddenly found a reason to switch checkout lanes when she saw me. At the hospital, I noticed sidelong glances from the receptionist. Finally, Nancy, one of the other nurses, pulled me into the supply closet. "You need to know," she whispered. "Phyllis Donahue is telling everyone you're having an affair with Dr. Thompson." My stomach dropped. "What? That's insane. He gave me a ride home because my car was in the shop." "I know that, and you know that," Nancy said. "But Phyllis is persuasive, and she's known most of these people their entire lives." "Can't I just explain?" Nancy's sympathetic look told me everything. In a battle of credibility between the town newcomer and Phyllis Donahue, there was no contest. That night, I sat on my back porch watching fireflies and questioning every life decision that had led me to Willow Creek. I could move again. I was practically a professional at starting over, but the thought exhausted me. I'd come here for stability, for community. I'd been so sure this time would be different. A soft meow interrupted my spiral of self-pity. A scraggly orange cat appeared at the edge of my porch, regarding me with wary eyes. "Hello there," I said softly. "Are you having a rough day too?" The cat cautiously approached, accepting a gentle scratch behind the ears before settling beside me. We sat together in companionable silence as darkness fell. "I'm not running this time," I told the cat, suddenly resolute. "I'm tired of letting other people decide where I belong." The cat purred as if in agreement. What I didn't know then was that the orange cat belonged to Phyllis Donahue, the only living creature she showed any genuine affection for, and I certainly didn't know that my kindness to her beloved pet would be the first of many actions Phyllis would secretly observe, catalog, and eventually weigh in her final judgment of me. I also couldn't have imagined that within 6 months I'd be standing at her funeral, telling lies about her character, or that those lies would somehow unlock the truth that would change everything in our little town of Willow Creek, Oregon. As summer turned to autumn in Willow Creek, Phyllis Donahue's campaign against me bloomed like toxic algae on a stagnant pond. No longer content with simply spreading rumors, she began what I could only describe as psychological warfare. At the September town hall meeting, I found my name on the agenda under community concerns. Confused, I sat through presentations about the winter festival and library funding until Mayor Wilson said, "Now, regarding the complaint about Nurse Hayes' property," Phyllis stood, folder in hand. "I've documented 14 separate violations," she announced, as if presenting evidence in a capital murder trial. "Most concerning is the continued operation of what appears to be an unlicensed healthcare business from her residence." My jaw dropped. "What?" "Several individuals have been seen entering and exiting at odd hours," Phyllis continued, ignoring my outburst. "Many appearing infirm or under duress." Ellen Wilcox jumped to her feet. "That was me and my book club, Phyllis. We meet at Samantha's because she makes the best lemon bars in town." Laughter rippled through the room, but Phyllis remained unmoved. "Additionally, there's the matter of the unauthorized pet." "You mean the stray cat?" I interjected, finding my voice. "The one I've been feeding because it was half-starved?" Phyllis's eyes narrowed. "Pets must be registered with the HOA, as clearly stated in—" "It's not my pet," I said. "It just visits sometimes." "Convenient excuse." She sniffed. Mayor Wilson, clearly uncomfortable, moved us along to the next agenda item. But the damage was done. Once again, I'd been publicly portrayed as a rule breaker, someone who couldn't be trusted. After the meeting, Ellen walked me home under a canopy of maple trees beginning to turn crimson and gold. "Don't let her get to you," she said. "Everyone sees what she's doing." "Do they?" I kicked at a pile of leaves. "Because it feels like they believe her." "Some might," Ellen admitted, "but more are questioning her these days. Phyllis has been different lately." "Different how?" Ellen hesitated. "More intense. She's always been a busybody, but this fixation on you feels personal even for her." I thought about the orange cat, who now spent most evenings on my porch. Maybe she knows. "I'm stealing her cat's affection," I joked weakly. "Maybe." Ellen didn't laugh. "Just be careful, dear. Phyllis doesn't like losing control of any situation. October brought crisp mornings and the annual Willow Creek Harvest Festival. I volunteered to staff the first aid station, hoping to integrate myself more into the community. For a few blissful hours, I bandaged skinned knees and handed out ice packs for minor bumps, feeling useful and briefly accepted. Then I overheard the whispers. That's her, the nurse who's been writing illegal prescriptions. I froze, cotton ball in hand, as two women at the cider stand continued, unaware I could hear them. Phyllis says the medical board is investigating her. That's why she left Portland. No wonder she can afford that house on a nurse's salary. My hands trembled as I finished bandaging a child's elbow. False accusations about Dr. Thompson were one thing. Those affected my social standing. But this could destroy my career. That evening, as festival lights twinkled against the darkening sky, I confronted Phyllis at the pie judging table where she was holding court. May I speak with you? I kept my voice low, professional, the same tone I used with agitated patients. She smiled thinly. Of course, dear. We stepped away from the crowd, behind the display of prize pumpkins. I know what you've been saying, I said, cutting to the chase. About prescriptions. About why I left Portland. I merely repeat what I hear, she replied, examining her manicured nails. No, you don't. You invent these stories. And this one could cost me my license, my entire career. For a fleeting second, something like uncertainty crossed her face, but it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. Perhaps, she said coolly, if there's no truth to it, you have nothing to worry about. That's not how rumors work, and you know it. I stepped closer. Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you? She straightened her shoulders. This town has standards, Miss Hayes. People who belong and people who don't. I'm merely helping Willow Creek maintain its quality of community. By destroying mine? Phyllis adjusted her scarf with deliberate precision. If your place in this community is so easily threatened, perhaps it wasn't meant to be your community at all. As she walked away, her parting shot hit its mark. It was the same message I'd heard throughout my life in the foster system. You don't belong here. This isn't your home. You're just passing through. Winter descended on Willow Creek with an unexpected ferocity that year. Snow blanketed our little town by mid-November, transforming it into a scene from a Christmas card. I should have been enchanted, but the beauty felt hollow as my isolation grew. Patients requested different nurses. Invitations to holiday gatherings mysteriously stopped arriving. Even the orange cat visited less frequently, perhaps deterred by the snow or reclaimed by Phyllis. The only bright spots were Ellen's unwavering friendship and my growing connection with Pastor Fields, who'd sought me out after noticing I'd stopped attending Sunday services. People respect you more than, he told me over coffee at the only diner in town. Your resilience hasn't gone unnoticed. Resilience, I repeated, stirring my cooling coffee. Is that what we're calling survival now? He smiled sadly. Sometimes survival is the most profound form of resistance. I hadn't thought of it that way before. That by simply continuing to show up, head held high despite Phyllis's attacks, I was refusing to surrender the place I'd chosen as home. So I continued. Through Christmas, where I volunteered at the hospital, so others could be with family I didn't have. Through New Year's, which I spent with Ellen, watching old movies and making half-hearted resolutions. Through January, when I slipped on ice outside the grocery store and not a single bystander offered to help me up. February brought the annual Founders' Day celebration, commemorating Willow Creek's establishment in 1867. The community center was transformed for the banquet, tables adorned with blue and silver, the town colors. Despite my better judgment, I attended, wearing the one cocktail dress I owned, a deep emerald that brought out the green in my hazel eyes. I sat at Ellen's table, surrounded by her friends from the garden club, older women who'd known Phyllis for decades and seemed immune to her influence. We were halfway through dessert when Phyllis clinked her glass for attention. As chairperson of the Founders' Day Committee, she began, I'd like to recognize some special members of our community. She proceeded to call up various townspeople for contributions, ranging from organizing the Christmas pageant to donating a new flagpole for the elementary school. Each received a small plaque and warm applause. Then, to my astonishment, she said, and finally, I'd like to recognize someone whose dedication to Willow Creek deserves acknowledgement. Samantha Hayes. A confused murmur rippled through the room. Ellen squeezed my hand encouragingly as I made my way to the podium, heart pounding. Phyllis's smile didn't reach her eyes as she handed me a plaque. I glanced down at the inscription, for persistent efforts to integrate into our community. It wasn't an honor. It was a subtle public humiliation, highlighting my status as an outsider still seeking acceptance. Perhaps, Phyllis added, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone, Miss Hayes could share what drew her to our little town. We're also curious about your background. The trap was perfectly set. If I declined, I'd appear ungrateful. If I spoke, she'd undoubtedly find something in my words to twist later. I took a deep breath and stepped to the microphone. Thank you for this recognition, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. What drew me to Willow Creek was simple. I was looking for home, and despite challenges, I've found that here, with people who exemplify what community truly means. My eyes found Ellen, Pastor Fields, and a few others who'd shown me kindness. Not everyone welcomes newcomers, and that's okay. But to those who do, who understand that community grows stronger through inclusion, not exclusion, thank you. You're why I stay. The applause that followed felt genuine. Phyllis's tight-lipped expression confirmed I'd somehow escaped her trap, and perhaps even turned it against her. As I returned to my seat, Pastor Fields caught my eye and nodded slightly. It was a small victory in a long, exhausting war, one that would take an unexpected turn just weeks later when Phyllis Donahue was found dead in her garden on the first warm day of March, secateurs still clutched in her hand and her orange cat watching from atop the fence. The day of Phyllis's funeral dawned with inappropriate perfection, clear blue skies, birds singing, spring flowers pushing through the last patches of snow. I'd spent the morning pacing my house, debating whether to even attend. No one would blame me for skipping the service of a woman who'd made it her mission to drive me out of a town. Yet something pulled me toward that chapel, a sense of closure, perhaps, or simply morbid curiosity. What would people say about her? Would anyone speak the truth, or would they weave comforting fictions about a woman dedicated to her community? I never imagined I'd be the one creating those fictions, standing at that pulpit, or that my impulsive act of mercy would trigger whatever bombshell Daniel Ortiz was about to drop. As the service concluded with a half-hearted rendition of Amazing Grace, people filed out in clusters, buzzing with speculation. I remained seated as instructed, watching Daniel gather his documents at the front of the chapel. Ellen squeezed my shoulder as she passed. Want me to stay? I shook my head. I'll call you after. Be careful, she whispered. Phyllis never did anything without an agenda. When the chapel emptied, Daniel approached my pew. Up close, he looked tired, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from dealing with complicated people. Thank you for waiting, Miss Hayes. He sat beside me, placing his leather portfolio on his lap. What you did today was remarkable. It wasn't really, I said, uncomfortable with his praise. I just couldn't stand the silence. Most people would have let her memory drown in that silence, especially someone she treated as poorly as she treated you. I studied his face. How much do you know about that? Everything. He opened his portfolio. Phyllis was nothing, if not thorough, in her record-keeping. A chill ran through me. She kept records? Of what she did to me? Of what she did? Of what she observed? Of what she tested? He extracted a sealed envelope. This is for you. From Phyllis. I stared at it like it might bite. I don't understand. Neither did I at first. Daniel's expression softened. I've been Phyllis's attorney for 20 years. I thought I knew her. The pettiness, the control issues, the need to be the moral authority. But in her final months, something changed. Changed how? He gestured to the envelope. She explains it better than I can. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded several pages of elegant handwriting. Miss Hayes, if you're reading this, then two things have occurred. I have died, and you have done something I long suspected you might. Shown kindness where none was deserved. You're wondering why I targeted you. The simple answer is this. You reminded me of someone, myself, before life hardened me into the woman Willow Creek came to fear. I moved here in 1982 with my husband, Robert. Like you, I was an outsider. Like you, I was determined to make this place my home. Unlike you, I failed. When the gossip started, rumors about my marriage, my childlessness, my ambitions, I had two choices. Become the victim or control the narrative. I chose the latter, becoming so proficient at wielding gossip that people feared being the subject of it. Power through fear, an effective but hollow victory. Watching you these past months, your dignity in the face of my cruelty, your persistent kindness even to my neglected cat, forced me to confront what I had become. So I tested you. Repeatedly. Ruthlessly. I needed to know. Were you genuine? Or merely performing goodness? Would you break under pressure and reveal the same ugliness that consumed me? Or would you remain steadfast? You never broke, Miss Hayes. Never stooped to my level. Never became what I became. And so, my final test. Would you show compassion, even to your tormentor? By eulogizing me with undeserved kindness, you have answered that question definitively. In my will, you will find that I have left you my house and property at 435 Maple Lane. Before you refuse out of pride or lingering resentment, know that this is not charity. It is restoration. The community took something from me decades ago, and I took much from you this past year. Perhaps in you, Willow Creek can finally have the heart it has always needed, but never deserved. You belong here more than I ever did. With reluctant admiration, Phyllis E. Donahue, P.S. Please take care of Theodore. He's quite fond of you, and cats are excellent judges of character. I looked up, vision blurred with tears I couldn't explain. Theodore? The orange cat, Daniel clarified. She rescued him as a kitten 6 years ago. Only living creature she seemed to genuinely love. I let out a strangled laugh. All this time, I was stealing her cat's affection. I think she admired that he saw something in you she was struggling to recognize. Daniel handed me another document. This is a copy of the relevant portion of her will. The house is yours, free and clear, no mortgage, taxes paid through the year. I scanned the legal language, trying to process what this meant. Phyllis had left me her home, the largest and most well-maintained property on Maple Lane, the house I passed daily on my way to work, the headquarters from which she'd launched countless attacks on my character. Why? I whispered. Why me and not family? Friends? Daniel closed his portfolio. Phyllis had no living relatives. As for friends, he shrugged. You saw the funeral. But this is... I waved the papers. People will think I manipulated her somehow, that I took advantage, which is precisely why there will be a public reading of the will tomorrow at Town Hall, he interrupted. Phyllis anticipated the reaction. She was very specific about how this should be handled. I stared at the letter again, trying to reconcile the woman who wrote these reflective words with the Phyllis Donahue I'd known. It seemed impossible they could be the same person. She was dying, Daniel said quietly, answering my unspoken question. Cancer. Diagnosed last fall. She told no one except me. That explains the different behavior Ellen mentioned. He nodded. Facing mortality has a way of clarifying perspective. We sat in silence for a moment, the empty chapel creaking around us. Finally, I folded the letter carefully. What happens now? Tomorrow at noon, the official reading. After that, it's up to you. He rose to leave. For what it's worth, Miss Hayes, I've executed hundreds of wills in my career. This is the first time I've seen someone attempt redemption through one. As he walked away, I called after him. Did she find it? Redemption? Daniel paused at the chapel door, sunlight silhouetting his figure. That, he said softly, depends entirely on what you do next. The town hall was packed by 11:45 the next day. I arrived early at Daniel's request, slipping in through a side entrance to avoid the crowd gathering in front. He ushered me into a small conference room adjacent to the main hall. Quite the turnout, he remarked, adjusting his tie. News travels fast in Willow Creek. What exactly did you tell people? I asked, smoothing my simple black dress, the same one I'd worn to the funeral. It was the only appropriately somber outfit I owned. Only that Phyllis Donahue's will contained instructions that affected the community and required a public reading. He glanced at his watch. Are you ready for this? No, I wasn't. How could anyone be ready? To be thrust into the center of a small-town spectacle? But I nodded anyway. At precisely noon, Mayor Wilson called the assembly to order. The murmur of conversation died as Daniel and I entered from the side door. I felt dozens of eyes tracking me as I took a seat in the front row. Ellen gave me an encouraging smile from across the aisle, but most faces registered only confusion or suspicion. Daniel took his position at the podium, arranging his papers with deliberate calm. Thank you all for coming, he began. As executor of Phyllis Eleanor Donahue's estate, I am required to read certain portions of her will in this public forum, as per her explicit instructions. He cleared his throat and began reading the formal legal preamble. I tried to focus on my breathing instead of the whispers behind me. And being of sound mind and body, Daniel continued, reaching the substantive portion, I, Phyllis Eleanor Donahue, hereby bequeath the following. To the Willow Creek Public Library, I leave my collection of first edition classics, valued at approximately $70,000, with the stipulation that they remain available for public viewing, but protected under appropriate conservation conditions. A surprised murmur rippled through the crowd. Phyllis had never shown particular interest in the library. To the Willow Creek Historical Society, I leave $50,000 for the maintenance of the town archives, with special attention to preserving the original town charter and founding documents. More whispers. Phyllis had been vocal about the Historical Society's wasteful spending. To Pastor Robert Fields of Grace Chapel, I leave $25,000 to establish a community counseling program, with the explicit condition that services be available to all residents regardless of church membership or religious affiliation. Pastor Fields looked stunned. I remembered his uncomfortable expression at the funeral, how he'd struggled to find positive things to say about a woman who'd used religious propriety as a weapon. Daniel continued through several smaller bequests: donations to the elementary school, the volunteer fire department, the annual Founders' Day celebration. With each unexpected act of generosity, the mood in the room shifted. Confusion gave way to bewilderment, then to a tentative appreciation. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. And to Samantha Hayes, Daniel's voice seemed to grow more formal, I leave my primary residence and property at 435 Maple Lane, including all furnishings and personal effects contained therein, with the following explanation to be read publicly. He turned the page, and I could have sworn the entire room held its breath. For the past year, I have subjected Miss Hayes to a deliberate campaign of social isolation, gossip, and public humiliation. My reasons were initially petty, and later, as I came to recognize in my final months, rooted in my own failures of character. Despite my cruelty, Miss Hayes maintained a dignity and kindness I found both infuriating and ultimately humbling. This bequest is not charity but restitution. It is also a test for the community of Willow Creek, a community that stood by as I targeted a newcomer, that repeated my poisonous gossip without question, that chose comfortable complicity over difficult truth. Will you repeat the same pattern with this bequest? Will you whisper that she manipulated a dying woman, that she doesn't deserve such fortune? Or will you finally recognize the character of the woman I tested so thoroughly and who never once failed that test? Willow Creek prides itself on being a community of values. Today you must decide what those values truly are. The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at my hands, unable to look at the faces around me, uncertain whether I'd find hostility or shame, unsure which would be worse. Daniel's voice cut through the silence. Additionally, Miss Hayes inherits all funds remaining in my accounts after the aforementioned bequests, amounting to approximately $350,000. A collective gasp filled the room. There is one final condition, Daniel continued. Miss Hayes must reside in the property for a minimum of 5 years. Should she choose to sell or leave before that time, the house and remaining funds will be liquidated and divided among the other beneficiaries listed herein. He closed the folder. This concludes the public reading of Phyllis Eleanor Donahue's last will and testament. Thank you for your attention. The room erupted in conversation. I remained frozen in my seat as Daniel gathered his papers. He leaned down to whisper, "My car is out back if you'd prefer to avoid the crowd." I nodded gratefully. As we slipped toward the side exit, Mayor Wilson intercepted us. "Miss Hayes," she said, her politician smile firmly in place. "What a surprising turn of events. I hope you know the town council would be happy to work with you regarding any plans you might have for the property." The same Mayor Wilson who had barely acknowledged my existence at previous town functions. "Thank you," I replied noncommittally. "I'll need some time to think." As we continued toward the door, more people approached, some offering congratulations, others clearly fishing for information. The Parkers actually apologized for believing Phyllis's rumors about me. Mrs. Chen invited me to her garden club meeting. Everyone suddenly wanted to be associated with the woman who'd inherited Phyllis Donahue's fortune. Finally, outside in the spring sunshine, I leaned against Daniel's car, drawing deep breaths. "That went about as expected," he observed. "They're like weather vanes," I said, surprised by the bitterness in my voice, pointing whichever way the wind blows. "People usually are." He unlocked the car. "Would you like me to drive you home? Or to your new home?" I hadn't even considered that part yet, that Phyllis's house was now mine. The thought of stepping into her space, surrounded by her belongings, felt surreal. "My apartment, please. I need time to process." As we drove past the town square, I spotted Pastor Fields walking alone, head bowed in thought. On impulse, I asked Daniel to stop. "I'll just be a minute," I promised, climbing out before he could respond. Pastor Fields looked up as I approached, his weathered face breaking into a gentle smile. "Miss Hayes, quite a day for you. For all of us, I think," I replied. "Are you all right? You seem troubled." He sighed. "I'm wrestling with my conscience. For months I watched Phyllis's campaign against you and said nothing. Oh, I spoke to her privately, counseled her on Christian charity, but publicly?" He shook his head. "I was a coward. You were kind to me when others weren't," I reminded him. "That mattered. Not enough." His eyes were sad. "You know, Phyllis came to see me 3 weeks before she died. She asked a theological question that haunted me. If a lifetime of cruelty can be forgiven through sincere repentance, what is the responsibility of the repentant to make amends for the harm caused?" "What did you tell her?" "That true repentance requires both contrition and, where possible, restitution." He gestured toward the town hall. I had no idea she'd take my words so literally. "Do you think she found it?" I asked, echoing my question to Daniel. "Forgiveness? Peace?" Pastor Fields considered this. "I believe she found something perhaps more valuable. Clarity. Whether that brought peace." He smiled sadly. "That's between her and God now." I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of Phyllis's final acts. The elaborate moral architecture she'd constructed around her death, with me as its reluctant cornerstone. "What will you do now?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "It feels wrong to profit from someone's guilt." "Perhaps consider it differently," he suggested. "Not profit, but purpose. Phyllis chose you because she saw something in you that Willow Creek needs. The question isn't whether you deserve her gift, but what you'll do with it." As I returned to Daniel's car, Pastor Fields' words echoed in my mind. Phyllis hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me a choice. I could reject her bequest and the community that had rejected me, or I could accept both and perhaps transform them in ways she'd only begun to imagine in her final days. Later that evening, as dusk settled over Willow Creek, I found myself standing before 435 Maple Lane, key in hand. Theodore the orange cat sat on the porch railing, watching me with inscrutable feline eyes. "Well," I said to him, "should we see what she left us?" He blinked slowly, then hopped down and rubbed against my legs. Together we crossed the threshold into Phyllis Donahue's house, my house now, and into whatever future her final test had set in motion. Stepping into Phyllis Donahue's home felt like entering a museum after hours, everything perfectly preserved yet eerily still. The foyer gleamed with polished hardwood and crystal light fixtures. To my right, a formal living room with Victorian furniture arranged in precise conversation groups. To my left, a dining room with china displayed in a hulking mahogany cabinet. Theodore padded confidently ahead, clearly at home among the antiques and oriental rugs. I followed more hesitantly, half expecting Phyllis herself to emerge from around a corner, demanding to know why I was trespassing. "This is something else," I murmured, running my finger along a dust-free sideboard. The house was immaculate, of course. Phyllis wouldn't have allowed herself to die with anything out of place, but it was also strangely impersonal. No family photos adorned the walls. No mementos cluttered the surfaces. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and utterly devoid of warmth. In the kitchen, a surprisingly modern space with high-end appliances, I found a note from Daniel on the counter. "Cleaning service comes Tuesdays. All utilities transferred to your name. Call if you need anything." Next to it sat a small stack of papers: property deed, insurance documents, alarm codes. Theodore meowed impatiently by his empty food bowl. "At least one of us knows what we need," I said, opening cupboards until I found pet supplies, neatly organized in a pull-out pantry. As I fed the cat, I noticed a door I'd missed, slightly ajar, revealing a staircase leading down. "Basement?" I wondered aloud. Theodore ignored me, focused on his dinner. The staircase was solid oak, not the rickety affair you'd expect in a house this age. Motion-activated lights clicked on as I descended, illuminating a space that took my breath away. Unlike the formal, impersonal rooms upstairs, the basement had been transformed into a vast library and office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with volumes ranging from leather-bound classics to paperback mysteries. A large desk occupied the center, its surface bare except for a laptop and a leather-bound journal. But it was the 4th wall that stopped me cold. Photographs. Dozens of them. Arranged chronologically, they documented the life of Willow Creek over 4 decades. Town festivals, construction projects, weddings and funerals, and in nearly every image, somewhere in the background stood Phyllis, watching, observing, recording. Moving closer, I realized the recent photos included me. There I was gardening in my front yard, chatting with Ellen on my porch, volunteering at the Harvest Festival, feeding Theodore. My God, I whispered, understanding dawning. This wasn't just decoration, it was surveillance. Phyllis had been documenting the town's life, creating a visual archive of everything and everyone that passed through Willow Creek. With trembling hands, I opened the journal on the desk. Inside, in Phyllis's precise handwriting, were dated entries, corresponding to many of the photographs. Not just observations, but judgments, secrets, vulnerabilities. June 12, 2015, Mayor Wilson's son seen leaving the Parkside Motel with his secretary. Third time this month. Useful if he runs for county commissioner as planned. September 4, 2018, Tom Parker showing signs of financial strain. Second mortgage taken out according to county records. Explains his sudden opposition to the school tax increase. December 19, 2023, Samantha Hayes volunteering Christmas Eve shift so Nurse Nancy can be with her children. Consistent with previous observations of character. Continues to resist retaliation despite escalating social pressure. I closed the journal, feeling sick. This was Phyllis's power source, her comprehensive catalog of the town's indiscretions, weaknesses, and secrets. With this knowledge, she'd maintained her position as Willow Creek's moral authority. With this, she'd known exactly how to isolate me, which rumors would stick, which pressure points would hurt most. And now it was all mine. I sank into the desk chair, overwhelmed. What was I supposed to do with this poisonous inheritance? Destroy it? Use it? The very existence of this archive made me complicit in Phyllis's decades-long manipulation of Willow Creek. Theodore appeared at my feet, apparently finished with his dinner. He jumped into my lap, purring as if to say, "This is just how things are. Accept it." "I can't," I told him, scratching behind his ears. "I can't be her." The next morning, I woke early in my apartment, having left Phyllis's house, my house, after only a few hours. I couldn't bring myself to sleep there, surrounded by her things, with the knowledge of her basement archive weighing on me. I had just finished my coffee when my phone rang. Ellen. "So?" she asked without preamble. "How was it?" "Complicated," I replied. "Can you meet me? There's something you should see." An hour later, I ushered Ellen into Phyllis's basement. She moved slowly along the photo wall, occasionally touching a frame, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "I had no idea," she finally said. "We all knew she collected gossip, but this..." She gestured at the meticulously organized evidence of decades of surveillance. "This is obsession. It's how she controlled everyone," I said. Why they believed her rumors about me. Ellen turned to me, her kind face solemn. "What will you do with it?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to burn it all. Another part thinks people deserve to know what she was doing. And then there's..." I hesitated, almost embarrassed to voice the thought that had been nagging me since I discovered the archive. "There's what?" Ellen prompted. "There's the possibility that some of this information could actually help people," I said slowly. "Not the gossipy parts, but look at this." I showed her an entry from 3 years earlier, detailing how the town council had quietly changed zoning laws to allow a developer to build on what had been designated conservation land. "No one ever knew about this," Ellen said, scanning the entry. "They blamed the environmental survey company when the project went through despite community opposition." "Exactly. There's real accountability hidden in here, alongside all the petty rumors and personal secrets." Ellen studied me. "So you're considering becoming Willow Creek's moral guardian, taking over where Phyllis left off?" "No," I said quickly. "God, no. But there must be some middle ground between exploiting secrets and burying the truth." She nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But treading that line..." She glanced around the basement. "It consumed her, Samantha. Don't let it consume you too." After Ellen left, I spent the day sorting through Phyllis's personal belongings upstairs. Her closet contained dozens of tailored outfits, shoes in perfect condition, jewelry in velvet-lined boxes. The bathroom cabinet revealed expensive creams and perfumes. Her nightstand held a well-worn Bible, and surprisingly a collection of poetry by Mary Oliver. Each item revealed something about the woman who'd tormented me, humanizing her in ways that made my anger harder to sustain. She'd been complex, cruel yet thoughtful, manipulative yet principled in her own way. By evening, I'd filled several, donation boxes, but made little progress on deciding what to do about the basement archive. Exhausted, I sank onto the living room sofa. Theodore immediately claimed my lap, kneading my thighs before settling into a contented ball. What would she want me to do? I asked him, as if the cat might channel Phyllis's intentions. She left all this to me for a reason. Theodore just purred, offering no cosmic insights. The doorbell interrupted my one-sided conversation. Through the peephole, I saw Pastor Fields on the porch, holding what appeared to be a casserole dish. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said when I opened the door. "Ellen mentioned you were staying here tonight. Thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal." I invited him in, touched by the gesture. As I led him to the kitchen, he glanced around with open curiosity. "I've never been inside," he admitted. "Phyllis preferred to meet at the church. Probably didn't want you seeing her command center," I said, then immediately regretted my candor. Pastor Fields raised an eyebrow. "Command center?" I hesitated, then decided truth was the only way forward. "You should probably see this." I showed him the basement. Unlike Ellen, who had been shocked, Pastor Fields seemed sadly unsurprised. "I always suspected something like this," he said, examining the photo wall. "Phyllis knew things she shouldn't have known, things people only shared in confidence." "Including during confession?" I asked. He shook his head. "We're not Catholic. No formal confession. But pastoral counseling? Yes." She seemed to have a sixth sense. "About private struggles." He turned to me. "Now I understand why." "What would you do?" I asked. "If all this fell into your lap?" He considered the question carefully. "Scripture tells us the truth will set us free, but it also teaches forgiveness and the danger of stones thrown by imperfect hands." He smiled gently. "I don't envy your position, Samantha." We returned upstairs and shared the casserole, a delicious chicken and wild rice dish that reminded me of family dinners I'd never had. "You know," Pastor Fields said as we ate, "Phyllis could have destroyed all this before she died. The fact that she preserved it, then gave it to you specifically," he let the thought hang, "means she trusted my judgment more than her own," I finished. "Or she's testing me from beyond the grave." "Perhaps both." He set down his fork. "Whatever you decide, remember that her choices don't have to dictate yours. This house, this information, they're tools. How you use them defines you, not her." After he left, I wandered through the house again, seeing it with fresh eyes. Not as a museum to Phyllis's life, but as a blank canvas for my own. I could make this place warm, welcoming, everything. Phyllis's reign had not been. In the master bedroom, I opened windows that probably hadn't admitted fresh air in years. The spring breeze carried the scent of apple blossoms from the tree in the backyard. Theodore hopped onto the windowsill, whiskers twitching at the night sounds. "Maybe this is what she wanted," I told him. "A fresh start, for this house, for Willow Creek." I thought of the basement archive, the power and poison it represented. I couldn't use it as Phyllis had, but I couldn't simply ignore it either. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would begin the careful work of sorting truth from gossip, accountability from voyeurism. Tomorrow I would start transforming Phyllis's legacy into something healing rather than harmful. But tonight, in this moment, I would simply be still and acknowledge the strange path that had led me here, to inherit not just the house of the woman who'd tried to destroy me, but also the profound responsibility of deciding what kind of neighbor I would choose to be. Summer arrived in Willow Creek with a vengeance that year, bringing record temperatures and the kind of sticky humidity that made even the simplest tasks exhausting. 3 months had passed since I'd moved into Phyllis's house, my house, and the transformation was well underway. Gone were the formal, untouchable furniture arrangements, replaced with comfortable seating that invited actual conversation. The dining room's imposing mahogany table now hosted weekly dinners where neighbors gathered without fear of judgment. Sunlight poured through windows no longer hidden behind heavy drapes. But the most significant changes weren't physical. "I still can't believe you're doing this," Ellen said, helping me carry folding chairs from her car to the backyard. "Phyllis must be spinning in her grave." "Or approving," I countered. "Hard to tell with her." We were preparing for the first meeting of what I'd tentatively named the Willow Creek Community Council, an unofficial gathering of 12 residents representing different neighborhoods and interests. My backyard, with its century-old apple tree providing generous shade, seemed the perfect neutral territory. "How many confirmed?" Ellen arranged chairs in a circle. "All 12, I replied, setting up a table with lemonade and cookies. "Even Mayor Wilson, though she seemed suspicious about my motives." Ellen snorted, probably worried what dirt Phyllis left you about her. The dirt was something I'd been grappling with since discovering Phyllis's archive. After weeks of moral wrestling, consultation with Pastor Fields, and one very late-night conversation with Daniel Ortiz about legal implications, I'd developed an approach that felt right. The petty gossip, personal secrets, and private struggles, anything that could only hurt, not help, had been systematically destroyed. I'd spent hours feeding papers into a shredder, deleting files, and even burning some of the most vicious material in my fire pit. But the documentation of public matters, corruption, cover-ups, manipulations of town policy, I'd preserved, not as weapons to wield when convenient, but as resources for addressing long-standing issues that had festered beneath Willow Creek's picturesque surface. Today's meeting would be the first tentative step towards something Willow Creek had never really had: transparent community problem-solving. By 3 o'clock, my backyard had filled with a cross-section of the town. Tom Parker represented the school parents. Mrs. Chen came for the gardening club and senior citizens. Luis Ramirez spoke for the growing Latino community. Pastor Fields attended, as did Dr. Thompson, Nancy from the hospital, the owner of the hardware store, and several others, including Mayor Wilson, who arrived precisely on time with a forced smile. "Welcome, everyone," I began once they were settled. "Thank you for coming. I know this is unconventional." "That's one word for it," Mayor Wilson said, her political smile firmly in place. "Though I'm still unclear on the purpose of this gathering, Miss Hayes." "Samantha, please," I corrected gently. "And the purpose is simple: to talk openly about making Willow Creek better for everyone." I explained my vision: a regular forum where concerns could be raised without fear, where diverse perspectives would be valued, where solutions could emerge from collaboration rather than control. "With all due respect," the mayor interjected, "we have official channels for town business. The council meetings, the various committees, which are valuable," I agreed, "but not always accessible or transparent." I took a deep breath. "For instance, how many people here knew about the zoning change 3 years ago that redesignated the Northwoods from conservation land to commercial development?" The silence was telling. Only the mayor and Tom Parker, who'd been on the council then, avoided eye contact. "I'm not bringing this up to point fingers," I continued. "I'm highlighting it because decisions that affect all of us shouldn't be made in ways that exclude most of us." "And how exactly did you come by this information?" Mayor Wilson asked, her smile fading. "Phyllis Donahue's infamous files, I presume?" The question hung in the air. Everyone knew about Phyllis's reputation for collecting secrets, but few knew about her meticulous documentation. "Yes," I said simply. "Phyllis left me many things: this house, her resources, and information about Willow Creek's past. Some of that information could be used to hurt people." I looked directly at the mayor. "That's not why we're here today." "Then why are we here?" Luis Ramirez asked. "You talk about transparency, but you're being vague, Samantha." It was a fair point. I glanced at Pastor Fields, who gave me an encouraging nod. "I'm trying to break a cycle," I explained. "Phyllis used information to control people through fear and shame. The town allowed it because it was easier than standing up to her. I refuse to continue that pattern, but I also can't pretend I don't know about serious issues affecting our community." I reached beside my chair and lifted a folder. The distilled, carefully curated documentation of public interest matters I'd extracted from Phyllis's archive. This contains information about decisions made in the past decade that affected all of us but weren't subjected to proper public scrutiny. I've removed anything personal or unnecessarily hurtful. What remains are facts everyone has a right to know. I placed it on the table beside the lemonade. "I'm not going to distribute it or publish it. Instead, I'm going to burn it. Tonight, after our meeting." Confused murmurs rippled through the group. "But first," I continued, "I'm inviting us to talk about how we move forward, how we create a Willow Creek where such secrets aren't possible because we're all engaged in transparent governance." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dr. Thompson leaned forward. "The hospital expansion has been stalled for 3 years because of budget constraints," he said. "Yet the town approved that new shopping development with tax incentives. I've never understood the priority shift." Mayor Wilson shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Chen raised her hand. "The water usage restrictions hit the east side harder than the golf course neighborhood. Is that in your folder, dear?" And just like that, the dam broke. For 2 hours, concerns poured out. Some I knew about from Phyllis's records, others entirely new. The mayor initially defended, then gradually began acknowledging problems. Others offered suggestions, perspectives, potential solutions. By sunset, we had established a framework for monthly meetings, created working groups for specific issues, and even planned a town hall forum to address the most pressing concerns. As everyone helped fold chairs and gather empty glasses, Mayor Wilson approached me. "That wasn't what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" "Blackmail, exposure, the kind of thing Phyllis would have done." I shook my head. "That's not who I am." She studied me, political calculation visible behind her eyes. What happens to the rest of it? The information she collected? The personal things? Already destroyed, I assured her. What's left focuses only on public matters that should never have been. Secret in the first place. She nodded slowly. "And you're really going to burn it tonight?" "Once the cycle is broken, there's no need to preserve evidence of it." After everyone left, I sat alone beneath the apple tree, the folder in my lap. Theodore appeared from wherever he'd been hiding during the gathering and jumped onto the chair beside me. "What do you think?" I asked him. "Did we make progress today?" He blinked slowly, which I chose to interpret as feline approval. Later, as darkness fell, I built a small fire in the backyard pit. One by one, I fed the remaining documents into the flames, not with anger or vindication, but with something like reverence for the transformation they represented. As the last page curled and blackened, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. Phyllis's legacy was no longer a burden I carried. It had become a catalyst for something new. The next morning, as I prepared for my shift at the hospital, a knock at my door surprised me. It was Tom Parker, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I just wanted to say, yesterday was important, for all of us." "I hope so," I replied. "My daughter, the one Phyllis spread rumors about, she's coming home from college next week." He hesitated. "We're having a welcome home barbecue on Saturday. We'd be honored if you'd come." It was a small gesture, but in Willow Creek it felt monumental. An invitation from a family that had once believed the worst about me. "I'd love to," I said sincerely. As Tom left, I noticed other changes unfolding. Across Maple Lane, Mrs. Chen was teaching the Peterson children how to plant sunflowers. Luis Ramirez and the hardware store owner were discussing the community center renovation over their shared property line. Small interactions, ordinary moments, but marked by an openness that had been missing under Phyllis's shadow. Walking to work that day, I took the long route past the town square, where a banner announced the upcoming Midsummer Festival. Pastor Fields was helping set up booths, and he waved when he spotted me. "Heard your meeting was a success," he called. I joined him briefly. "First step of many, but yes, I think it was." "You've started something important," he said, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "Something Phyllis never could." "What's that?" "Healing," he replied. Simply. She could identify wounds, even create them, but she never knew how to heal them. I thought about that as I continued to the hospital. Phyllis had tested me, pushed me to my limits, then entrusted me with both the source of her power and the opportunity to use it differently. In her own twisted way, perhaps she'd been searching for healing too. Not just for the town, but for herself. That evening, I sat on my front porch swing, a new addition to the house, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance. Theodore dozed beside me, his orange fur glowing in the last light of day. My phone chimed with a message from Ellen. Channel 5 doing story on mysterious town meetings. Wilson giving interview. Progress. I smiled, then noticed a figure approaching my gate. Daniel Ortiz, looking less formal than usual in rolled-up shirt sleeves. "Evening," he called. "Hope I'm not interrupting?" "Not at all." I gestured to the empty space on the swing. "Join me?" He settled beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. "I've been hearing things. About community councils and transparent governance. About a nurse who's shaking up the status quo. Good things or bad things?" I asked. "Depends who, you ask." He smiled. "But mostly good. Surprising, but good." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the street grow dim as porch lights flickered on down the block. "She would be pleased, I think," Daniel finally said. Not that she'd ever admit it. "No," I agreed. "She'd probably find something to criticize." "Undoubtedly." He chuckled. "But she chose well, better than she knew." As night settled over Willow Creek, I felt something I hadn't experienced since arriving in this town. A sense of genuine belonging. Not just acceptance or tolerance, but the profound knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Phyllis Donahue had tested me, pushed me to my breaking point, then given me the means to repair what she had broken. in me, in this community, and perhaps in some small way in herself. 1 year to the day after Phyllis Donahue's funeral, I stood in Grace Chapel again, this time not to eulogize, but to celebrate. The community center renovation was complete, and Pastor Fields had offered the chapel for a small dedication ceremony before the official ribbon cutting downtown. "It feels different in here," Ellen whispered, sliding into the pew beside me. "Less oppressive." She was right. The same stained glass windows cast their colorful light across the wooden pews, but the atmosphere had transformed. Where once there had been stiff formality and unspoken judgments, now there was the warm hum of genuine community, people chatting, children darting between seats, laughter echoing to the rafters. "Samantha!" Mrs. Chen waved from across the chapel. "I brought those seedlings for your garden. The purple coneflowers you admired." Before I could respond, Luis Ramirez appeared with his wife. "The Youth Center Committee approved your proposal. We start programming next month." Everywhere I turned, connections had formed where walls once stood. The monthly community council meetings had expanded into working groups, volunteer initiatives, and even official policy changes. Mayor Wilson, after initial resistance, had embraced the new transparency, finding it boosted both her popularity and her effectiveness. Pastor Fields called the gathering to order with a gentle tap on the microphone. "Welcome, friends," he began, his voice warm. "A year ago, many of us gathered in this space to say goodbye to a longtime member of our community. Today, we gather to celebrate something new born from that ending." He spoke about renewal, about the power of openness over secrecy, of connection over division. As he talked, I found myself reflecting on the remarkable journey of the past year. The house on Maple Lane had become a true home, not just for me and Theodore, but for anyone seeking counsel, community, or simply a cup of tea on a difficult day. I'd maintained my nursing position but reduced my hours to accommodate my growing community involvement. The basement, once Phyllis's surveillance center, had been completely reimagined as a neighborhood library and meeting space. The photo wall remained, but transformed. Now it displayed a growing collection of community moments, festivals, weddings, school events, everyday joys, captured not to control, but to celebrate. "And now," Pastor Fields concluded, "I'd like to invite Samantha Hayes to say a few words. Without her vision and persistence, today's celebration wouldn't be possible." A year ago, walking to that pulpit had been an act of impulsive mercy. Today, it felt like coming full circle as I faced not strangers or skeptics, but friends. "Thank you, Pastor Fields," I began. "When I moved to Willow Creek 2 years ago, I was looking for home, a concept that had always been elusive in my life. What I found instead was Phyllis Donahue." Gentle laughter rippled through the chapel. She tested me in ways I couldn't have imagined. She pushed me to my limits. And then, in her final act, she gave me both a challenge and an opportunity to turn poison into medicine. I looked around at the faces before me, faces that had once been closed to me, now open and attentive. What we're celebrating today isn't just a renovated community center or new programs. It's the reclamation of what community is meant to be, a place where we see each other fully, flaws and all, and choose connection over criticism, support over suspicion. As I spoke, I noticed Daniel Ortiz, slipping in at the back of the chapel. He gave me a small nod and I continued. "Phyllis left me her house, her resources, and yes, her secrets. But what she really left was a choice, to use those things as she had, or to find a different path. I chose differently. We all chose differently." After the ceremony, people lingered, sharing stories and plans for future projects. I was deep in conversation with the elementary school principal about a new mentoring program when Daniel approached. "Impressive transformation," he said, gesturing around the chapel, but meaning much more. Phyllis would hardly recognize the place. Would that please her or infuriate her? I asked with a smile. "Both, I suspect." He hesitated. "I have something for you. A letter. Another one." Phyllis left. Instructions for me to deliver it 1 year after her passing. He handed me a sealed envelope, identical to the one he'd given me after the funeral. "I'll leave you to read it privately," he said, then added with uncharacteristic informality. "For what it's worth, I think you've done exactly what she hoped, and far more than she imagined possible." Later that evening, after the ribbon cutting and community potluck, I finally returned home. Theodore greeted me at the door, weaving between my ankles as I made my way to the back porch, my favorite spot for quiet reflection. The evening was perfect. warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early summer blooms. In the distance, I could see lights from the town square where celebrations continued. Closer, my neighbors' homes glowed with welcoming warmth. I opened Phyllis's letter with steady hands. Miss Hayes, if Daniel has followed my instructions, you are reading this exactly 1 year after my funeral. I wonder what you've done with my house, my resources, my carefully collected leverage over this town. I wonder, but I cannot predict, because you have consistently defied my expectations. When I began my campaign against you, I expected you to flee like the others, to decide Willow Creek wasn't worth the trouble. When you stayed, I expected you to fight back with the same weapons I wielded. When you didn't, I expected your resolve to crack, your kindness to falter. It never did. I wonder now if you understand what I came to realize in my final months, that your strength made my weakness unbearable to witness. Your genuine goodness exposed my performative propriety for the hollow shell it was. I was never brave enough to change my ways while living. Perhaps through you, I have found a way to correct my course after death. Whatever you have done with my legacy, I trust it has been more worthy than what I did with my life. My final hope is that you have found in Willow Creek what I sought but never attained. Not control or power, but genuine belonging. With respect I never showed in life. Phyllis Donahue P.S. If Theodore has abandoned you as he occasionally did me, check Mrs. Chen's koi pond. He's rather fond of watching the fish. I folded the letter carefully, tears blurring my vision. Theodore, as if sensing my emotion, jumped into my lap and pushed his head against my hand, demanding attention. She understood more than she let on, I told him, scratching under his chin. Maybe we all do, beneath our defenses. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Ellen. Turn on Channel 5 News, she exclaimed without preamble. They're doing a feature on small-town revitalization, and Willow Creek is the showcase. I laughed. I'll catch the replay. I'm having a moment with Theodore and Phyllis's ghost. Another letter? Ellen guessed. Yes. Turns out she was more self-aware than we gave her credit for. Well, don't spend all night dwelling on the past. Pastor Fields mentioned you had an RSVP'd for the church picnic planning committee. I'll call him tomorrow, I promised. After we hung up, I sat watching fireflies rise from the lawn like earthbound stars reclaiming their place in the heavens. 1 year ago, I had stood in a silent chapel, telling kind lies about a cruel woman. Today, that same chapel had been filled with genuine warmth because of the unlikely chain of events her cruelty and subsequent remorse had set in motion. Life rarely gives us neat narratives or perfect justice. Phyllis had tormented me, tested me, then entrusted me with her legacy. I had hated her, pitied her, and ultimately found a way to honor not who she was, but who she might have been, who we all might be when we choose connection over control. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I woke early, fed Theodore, and decided to walk to the hospital rather than drive. The streets of Willow Creek greeted me like old friends. Familiar, flawed, but cherished. Outside the town square, a new bench had been installed beside the century-old oak tree. A small plaque caught my eye. Community grows where truth and kindness meet. Established 2025. I smiled, thinking of Phyllis's meticulous record-keeping transformed into open governance. Her isolation converted to connection. Her fear reshaped into trust. As I continued toward the hospital, I passed Mayor Wilson hanging flags for the upcoming 4th of July celebration. Morning, Samantha, she called. Community Council still on for Thursday? Wouldn't miss it, I replied. Good. We need your perspective on the affordable housing proposal. 2 years ago, I had been a stranger, targeted for exclusion. Now I was being sought for inclusion, not because I had schemed or manipulated my way into acceptance, but because I had remained true to myself even when it seemed easier not to. At the hospital, Dr. Thompson greeted me with a patient file. Mrs. Donahue's niece is visiting from Seattle, having some blood pressure issues. Asked for you specifically. Phyllis had a niece? I couldn't hide my surprise. Apparently so. She's been going through old family photos, found your name mentioned in her aunt's papers. Room 302 when you're ready. The revelation that Phyllis had family who was now connected to me, felt like one final twist in our intertwined story. As I prepared to meet this unexpected link to Phyllis's past, I thought of her letter, of her house transformed into a home, of a community healing after decades under her shadow. I thought of the cruel words that had died with her and the kindness that had lived on beyond her. Phyllis Donahue had spent her life testing people, finding them wanting, using their failures to maintain her position. In the end, She had tested me most rigorously of all, and in passing that test, I had found not just a house or a fortune, but a truth worth building a life around. That communities, like people, can transform when given the chance. That belonging isn't something we find, but something we create together. That even the most tangled human knots can be loosened with persistence and compassion. And that sometimes, the most powerful legacy we can leave is the opportunity for others to build something better than we ourselves could imagine. Theodore would be waiting when I returned home this evening. Ellen would call with committee updates. Pastor Fields would need help with the youth program. The community council would tackle next month's challenges. Life would continue its imperfect, beautiful unfolding in Willow Creek, Oregon. The place that had tested me, broken me, and ultimately become the home I had always sought.